Hello everybody, Max here, and I want to talk about a rash of crashes I've had with my electric RC aircraft lately. Now, like most people, when I first started, my first trainer was an apprentice, and I cracked it up a couple of times and fixed it, and that's to be expected. And that was followed by trying to make RCs out of some Gillows kits, but between construction flaws and general mistakes made during both construction and concept, they didn't do so well. All three of them crashed on their maidens. The Zero was overpowered and shed a wing during flight. The Stearman, I made the mistake at the last second of putting the battery in the wrong place and was tail heavy and went out of control and crashed. And the Stuka, I gave way too much control throw to, and it ended up on its back and I couldn't recover it. As a result, I decided to go ahead and stick with factory-made airplanes for a while. I wound up getting the 1400mm FMS Zero, and I've flown it for about 3 years without any serious incident. Now, it did have its share of mishaps, and it's gotten pretty beat up over time. Since it was starting to get a little long in the tooth, I decided to accompany it with a shiny new E-Flight P-47 Thunderbolt with the A3X system in it. This was a great flying airplane, but unfortunately, on about the 7th flight with the airplane, I made a mistake. I went out to go fly it, and it was a beautiful sunny day, but I forgot to put my hat on. I was all ready to fly and decided, what the heck, I can go without my hat. And of course, wouldn't you know, a few minutes into the flight, I lost it in the sun, and, well, there you go. I should have gone and gotten my hat. Now, I didn't let this bother me too much. After all, we all know that eventually you're going to crash them. It was regrettable that it was beyond repair, but I decided not to let that get me down. The next airplane I acquired was the FMS 1400mm Stuka. I wanted to get this one because the landing gear on the Zero was getting extremely problematic, and I decided I would go with fixed gear for a while. I even decided to convert the Zero to a Val dive bomber and leave the gear locked down, but despite this, the gear was still having trouble and would collapse readily. I went to do the maiden flight for the Stuka 3 times, but every time the weather was bad. At one point we waited out the weather, and I decided to give the semi-converted Zero a test flight before I flew the Stuka, partly to see how the plane would fly with the gear remaining down, and also partly to see how the weather was. Unfortunately, the airplane was having some pretty serious problems, and the weather was bad to boot. The result was I got behind the airplane and lost control. After knocking the nose off the airplane, I decided to stop flying for the day and to go ahead and finish rebuilding it as a Val. After completing the conversion to a Val dive bomber, I went out a couple of more times to go fly both the Stuka and my newly converted Val, but every time the wind was too high. Now, I had also acquired an FMS B-25 Mitchell, which I keep in another location. I was able to get it out to the flying field and make 2 successful flights in it, and I look forward to flying it again soon. But after 3 attempts to maiden the Stuka and the converted Val, I finally lost my patience. This was where the trouble really kicked in. I was actually coming back from the flying field, which is almost an hour from my house, and when I got home, I realized that the winds had died down. The weather was perfect for flying. There's a large public park near where I live where I used to fly the Apprentice. I never had any trouble flying the Apprentice there, so I thought I might try the Val. Fortunately, the Val had some issues, and as soon as it took off, it tried to get away from me. I managed to get it back under control, but when I tried to bring it back in for a landing, it sort of took on half of a mind of its own. I realized the landing was going to have to be aborted, and I tried to go around, but it didn't make it, and it went into a tree. Emboldened by my ability to keep the airplane inside the confines of the park, and realizing that the Stuka would probably fly much better, I made what was obviously, in hindsight, a special kind of stupid decision. I decided to go ahead and maiden the Stuka. Now, it had the A3X from the Crash Thunderbolt in it, and I had made sure everything was trimmed up just right. And the airplane took off beautifully and flew beautifully. But unfortunately, it was faster than the Zero or the Apprentice, and it quickly tried to leave the park. I kept a tight traffic pattern and brought it back in for an immediate landing, and everything was going fine. But as we all know, when you're watching the airplane, you can't watch much else. I did not realize that it had just left the edge of the park, and on the way back in, it found a 60-foot pine tree. Even though it was right off the edge of the park, it took me a while to locate where it had gone. And unfortunately, it was on the private property of a homeowner. Needless to say, the homeowner was not thrilled, and although they were overall a good sport about it, there was no way they were going to let me onto their property to try and recover it, especially not 60 feet up in a pine tree. They've promised me that if it ever falls out, they'll let me know. But until then, I'm out the Stuka and all the accoutrements. This makes 3 back-to-back crashes out of 5 flights. I've never had a Rash this bad before. I've gone almost 3 years without incident, and now I've had 3 of them back-to-back. But every one of these crashes was a result of the exact same thing: impatience. If I had just gone to get my hat, I probably wouldn't have crashed the Thunderbolt. If I had just waited until the wind died down at the regular flying field, I probably wouldn't have lost the Val or the Stuka. So the moral of the story is, don't be lazy, don't be impatient, don't get I've got to fly-itis, and don't be stupid. Well, this is Max, and don't be stupid.